What happens when an empire thinks humanity is weak, quiet, and easy to control? What happens when that same empire finally says the one sentence humans have been waiting to hear? Before we enter the story, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves stories where humanity stays calm until the whole galaxy realizes why. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was older than many planets in the Alliance. Its black walls had seen peace treaties, surrender terms, and the final words of dying nations. Every stone in that room carried a history of power. 47 species had placed their marks across the ceiling. Each symbol meant the same thing. We are strong. We belong here. We decide who rises and who falls. At the far end of the giant table sat one human woman. Her name was Lena Vasquez. She was the ambassador of Earth. For 11 years, she had sat in that same place. She had listened to insults wrapped in polite language. She had watched powerful species laugh at human warnings. She had seen smaller species sit in silence because fear had stolen their voices long ago. Lena was 43 years old. She had dark eyes, a calm face, and the kind of stillness that made people uncomfortable when they could not understand it. She had never raised her voice in that chamber. Not once. And today, she did not plan to. At the head of the chamber, High Speaker Vethkel rose from his throne. He was tall, silver-scaled, and dressed in violet robes that marked him as the voice of the council. For cold eyes moved across the room before stopping on the human ambassador. When he spoke, the translation machines hummed softly. The council has reached a final decision regarding Earth. The chamber went silent. Vethkel continued. Earth's territorial borders will be reduced by 60%. This will begin in 30 standard cycles. Human military ships above Class 4 must be surrendered to Council control. Also, 22% of Earth's yearly resources will be redirected to Council projects. No one spoke. Not because they were shocked. Because they were waiting to see if the human would be foolish enough to argue. The smaller species looked down at the table. Some looked afraid. Others looked tired, as if they had seen this same scene happen too many times before. Vethkel leaned forward. If Earth refuses, it will be considered an act of hostility against the Council and all member species. The result of such hostility has been made clear in history. A few delegates smiled. The Kadhari representative clicked his claws together in amusement. His species had always enjoyed watching weaker worlds bend. The Velmir delegate, small and gray, stared at the table without moving. Everyone turned toward Lena. She did not move. Her hands rested flat on the table. Her breathing stayed slow. Her face gave nothing away. Vethkel smiled. Ambassador Vasquez, the council waits for Earth's acknowledgement. Lena raised her eyes. First, she looked at Vethkel. Then she looked around the chamber. She did not look angry. She did not look afraid. She looked like someone carefully remembering every face in the room. Then she reached under the table and touched the small communicator on her wrist. Council security had checked that device 3 times. They had called it harmless diplomatic equipment. They were wrong. Lena pressed one button. A secure channel opened, hidden under layers of encryption. The signal bounced through secret relays and went straight to Earth. She spoke only 3 words. They said it. Then she closed the channel. Vethkel blinked all 4 eyes. Ambassador, the council requires a formal answer. Lena folded her hands. You already have it, she said quietly. The chamber did not understand. Not yet. Some delegates laughed. Others whispered among themselves. They thought this was human pride. Human drama. The last brave words of a young species that did not understand how small it was. Lena sat back and waited. Above the chamber door, the universal clock showed the time. In less than 7 minutes, time itself would stop mattering. Far beyond the walls of Nexus Station, in the silent dark of space, ships began to move. They had already been waiting. That was something the galaxy had never understood about humans. Humans prepared for disaster while smiling at the dinner table. They made peace, but studied war. They shook hands, but measured the room. They joined alliances, but asked themselves what would happen if those alliances ever turned against them. It was not madness. It was memory. Humanity had never been the strongest creature on Earth. Humans were not born with claws, armor, venom, or wings. They were not the fastest animals. They were not the largest predators. But they survived. They watched. They planned. And when the moment came, they acted together. 41 years before that day, humanity made first contact with the Salvon Collective. The public on Earth saw celebration. They saw broadcasts, speeches, and smiling diplomats. They saw the beginning of a new age. But behind closed doors, a different conversation began. What if the aliens were hostile? What if they were friendly now, but hostile later? What if the Council was not an alliance, but a cage? What if Earth had to fight alone? Inside secure rooms in Geneva, Colorado Springs, and a frozen facility deep in Siberia, men and women began building answers to those questions. That secret plan was called Protocol Prometheus. It was created by Dr. Yale Oren, a military strategist who had spent her life studying how weaker nations survived against stronger enemies. When she studied Salvon history, she found something terrifying. The Council did not usually destroy species. It absorbed them. It took their ships, their resources, their laws, and even their language. Then it called them protected members. Dr. Oren wrote one sentence in her classified report. They will come for us one day. We must be ready before they believe we can be ready. Earth joined the Council. Earth smiled. Earth traded. Earth learned their customs and sent friendly diplomats. Human delegates asked harmless questions about station design, military protocol, trade routes, and power systems. They sounded curious. They sounded young. They sounded impressed. The Council answered. For 30 years, humanity listened. Every technology shared with Earth was studied and improved. Every ship registered with the Council was an older model. Every military base reported to the Council was listed at less than its real strength. The real ships were hidden. The real stations were buried in asteroid fields. The real fleet waited behind dead moons, inside dark zones, and in places Council survey teams were never allowed to fully inspect. When Lena's message reached the Siberian facility, a duty officer looked at his screen. He had waited 11 years for those words. He did not panic. He entered his code. He pressed his thumb to the scanner. Then he spoke into the system. Prometheus is active. All fleets execute orders. Communications blackout in 30 seconds. Across human space, lights came on. Engines woke in silence. Soldiers stood from their chairs. Commanders opened sealed instructions that had not been touched in years. Humanity's real fleet began to move. Not in anger. Not in fear. In silence. In the Council chamber, 4 minutes had passed. Vethkel was becoming impatient. He had demanded a formal response twice. Both times, Lena had calmly told him she was waiting for confirmation from Earth. The laughter had faded. The Kathari representative no longer seemed amused. Something about Lena's calmness was beginning to bother him. She was not acting like a trapped prey animal. She was not begging, bargaining, or threatening. She was waiting like she already knew the ending. Then the first alarm sounded. It was a low warning from station sensors. At first, the operations center thought it was space debris. Then the debris changed direction. Then it formed patterns. A voice came through the chamber speakers. "Hi speaker, we are detecting unregistered vessels entering the outer perimeter." Vethkel turned sharply. "How many?" 47. "Correction, 63. More contacts appearing." "Species identification?" There was a pause. Then the officer answered. Human, sir. But the designs do not match any ships in our registry. The chamber exploded into noise. Delegates stood. Voices overlapped. Demands flew across the room. How had humans brought ships so close? Why were they unregistered? How many were there? Vethkel raised one hand and forced silence. He looked at Lena. Explain this provocation. Lena looked up at him. Those are our ships. Vethkel's jaw tightened. We have records of every ship in your fleet. No, Lena said. You have records of the ships we allowed you to see. Another alarm sounded. Then another. The tactical screens lit up. Human ships were not only at Nexus Station. They were appearing at the Salvon Relay Network. At the Kat Hari staging zones. At the Council emergency depots. At every important military location across Council space. All at once. Admiral Drexen, one of the Council's senior military minds, stared at the display in disbelief. How long? He whispered. No one answered at first. His tactical officer ran the numbers with shaking hands. To place that many vessels so perfectly, at those exact weak points, the planning could not have started recently. Sir, the officer said softly, these positions suggest at least 15 to 20 years of preparation. Drexen closed his eyes. For decades, humans had attended meetings, argued over trade rules, smiled at ceremonies, and submitted boring reports. And the whole time, they had been planning where to place their ships when the Council finally showed its teeth. Lena stood for the first time that day. Her voice stayed calm. You had 6 minutes to reconsider, she said. You spent them laughing. The lights went out. For 1 second, Nexus Station fell into complete darkness. Then emergency lights turned the chamber red. Several species could not see red light, so they cried out in confusion. Others stumbled away from the table. The Council's defense systems began locking on to targets. But the human ships did not rush in. They did not fire wild shots. They took positions. Precise positions. Beautiful positions. Deadly positions. Every Council weapon angle was covered. Every escape path was blocked. Every defense grid had a human ship waiting in the exact place needed to silence it. The station's military intelligence tried to calculate how humanity knew its structure so well. The answer was simple. Humans had been invited on 3 diplomatic tours over the years. They had looked. They had remembered. They had built a battle plan from politeness. Every screen on the station changed at once. Public displays. Private devices. Tactical boards. Wall monitors. All showed Lena Vasquez sitting calmly in the Council chamber. Under her image appeared one message in every member language. Surrender station defense codes. Release all non-Council personnel. Stand down. You have 90 seconds. Vethkel answered with rage. He refused. 90 seconds passed. Then humanity moved. And the Council learned what it meant to fight a species that had already practiced the battle for years. The attack lasted 11 minutes and 4 seconds. That was all. 11 minutes and 4 seconds to break the heart of the Galactic Council. Human forces disabled communications first. Then weapons. Then docking controls. Then command locks. They moved through the station like a storm with a map. There was no chaos. No shouting. No waste. Every team had a task. Every corridor had been studied. Every door had been expected. Council soldiers tried to respond, but their orders arrived too late. Their systems failed too fast. Their escape routes closed before they reached them. In a maintenance corridor on level 9, a Drati scribe named Davil hid behind a service panel. He was not a soldier. His people were small, thin, and usually used as record keepers by stronger species. A human soldier passed within 2 meters of him. She wore dark armor. No visible rank. Her weapon was ready. She looked at Davil. For 1 second, he thought he would die. Then her eyes moved on. She had judged him as no threat. She kept moving. Later, Davil would write that this moment frightened him more than any explosion. Not because she spared him. Because she decided so quickly. The council leaders had sealed themselves inside a secure chamber on level 12. They had always been told that room could survive anything. They believed it. Human engineers had spent 9 years studying the same model of lock. The door opened in under 40 seconds. By the time the station clock reached 14 hours 26 minutes and 7 seconds, Nexus Station had fallen. The emergency lights went off. White human control lights came on. And the station became quiet. Not peaceful. Stopped. Like an empire holding its breath. If this story already has you locked in, tap like, subscribe, and share it with one friend who believes humans are at their best when the odds are ugly and the room underestimates them. Across the galaxy, the news did not arrive in one clean message. On Salvon Prime, the government broadcast first called it a security incident. Then the signal disappeared for 4 hours. When it returned, the news anchor looked like someone had placed a knife under the desk. He read one statement. The council leadership has been incapacitated. Nexus Station is under temporary external administration. All Salvon military forces are ordered to hold position. Then music played. Old funeral music. On Kathari networks, the reaction was louder. Generals shouted over one another. Some demanded immediate war. Some warned that humanity had clearly prepared for that response too. One general said the council deserved what happened, and his microphone was cut before he finished the sentence. On Velmir home channels, the broadcast reached an old screen inside a former labor facility. A grandmother watched the footage with her 8-year-old granddaughter. The child did not understand everything. The grandmother did. She watched the council fall. Then she said in the old Velmir language, the one the council had tried to erase, someone finally got tired. In intelligence offices across many worlds, analysts began reopening old files on humanity. Reports that had once seemed boring now looked dangerous. Human trade questions. Human technical requests. Human academic papers. Human diplomats asking about defense grids as if they were simply interested in architecture. A Kathari analyst named Grevshin had warned for years that human behavior was too patterned to be random. His superiors ignored him. Now he spread his old reports across his desk and saw the truth clearly. Humans had not been preparing to conquer the council. They had been preparing for the war the council would eventually start. He wrote a new report. We were the threat. Humanity knew it before we did. This time, he sent the report to 20 offices. Without permission. 6 hours after Nexus Station fell, Lena Vasquez prepared for the most important broadcast in human history. She did not speak from the captured station. That was deliberate. Nexus Station was a wound. She did not want to speak from a wound. She spoke from a human ship. A ship meant to move forward. Her broadcast went out on every council frequency. Human communication teams now controlled them all. Within 40 minutes, her face appeared on screens across the known galaxy. She wore plain gray clothing. No flag behind her. No throne. No decoration. She looked tired. She had not slept. She looked straight into the camera, something many alien cultures found unsettling. Humans did it naturally. She began without a formal greeting. 11 hours ago, the Galactic Council threatened Earth with territorial seizure, forced military surrender, and resource extraction. This threat was made openly, in session, before representatives of every member species. She paused. Earth responded. Across the galaxy, people leaned closer. What happened today was not the beginning of a human empire. If we wanted conquest, this broadcast would not exist. You would be receiving orders. Another pause. The council was not true government. It was predation covered in paperwork. Those words moved like fire. She continued. 41 species were absorbed, weakened, or exploited while the council called it cooperation. The Velmir lost their resources and their children. The Cossati lost their sovereignty through a legal clause that was deliberately mistranslated. We have the original documents. We have had them for 9 years. She placed a data chip on the table. Everything is here. Every mistranslation. Every false report. Every hidden resource transfer. This data will be released to every independent news network and academic institution within the hour. There was no anger in her voice. That made it stronger. Then she spoke to the powerful species. The ones with fleets are deciding right now whether humanity is an enemy or a warning. Understand this. We did not destroy the council because we wanted power. We destroyed it because it threatened us, because we were ready, and because someone had to. No one doubted her. If you choose to make us your enemy, we will defend ourselves again. Completely. But that is not what we want. Her expression softened, only slightly. We want what every small species at the bottom of the table wanted and was never offered. A real seat. A structure where the Velmir home world belongs to the Velmir. Where the Cossati choose their own future. Where smaller species are not used as shields, labor, or silent votes. She leaned forward. We are building something new. It is not perfect. We are not asking you to trust us blindly. We are asking one question. She paused for 5 full seconds. Would you like to try again, as equals? The broadcast ended. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy had no idea what would happen next. The first answer came from the Velmir. Not from a government office. They did not have a real government anymore. The council had dissolved it long ago. Their answer came as a handwritten letter. Real paper. Made from a plant that only grew in the northern settlements of their world. A community archivist scanned it through a repaired agricultural transmitter. It was addressed to the human ambassador, wherever she is. The message was simple. We accept. We have nothing to offer except our word. We know that may not be enough. But we are saying yes because we are tired of waiting for someone to ask. It was signed by 47 community leaders. At the bottom was the old Velmir sovereign seal. No one had used that seal in public for 170 years. Someone had kept it hidden under a floor. Waiting. When Lena read the letter, she read it twice. Then she sat in silence. Her staff knew that was what she did when something moved her deeply. The Cossati answered next. They answered through 7 channels at once, because Cossati communication was loud, fast, and full of overlapping voices. After translation teams sorted through the noise, the meaning was clear. Yes. But they also sent a list of 23 grievances they wanted written into the new record. They had clearly been keeping that list for a long time. A young Cossati diplomat appeared on a joint feed less than 12 hours later. Her translator struggled to keep up. We have been waiting for someone who was not afraid of the Salvon, she said. You were not afraid. So we are here. What do you need us to do? Within 48 hours, 3 more species joined talks. All were smaller species. All had been pushed down by the council. All answered with the speed of people who had made their decision years ago but never had anyone safe to say it to. Humanity had prepared for that too. Not only with weapons. With ships carrying food. Medical supplies. Engineers. Translators. Legal teams. People who knew how to rebuild broken systems without taking them over. Some military officers had once questioned why Prometheus included medical support for oppressed species. Dr. Oren had written one note beside that section. If we are doing this, we are doing it completely. 7 days after the fall of Nexus Station, the first Velmir delegation arrived at a human orbital station. There were 12 of them. 6 elders. 3 archivists. 2 young translators. And 1 very old woman not listed properly on the manifest. When asked her name, she gave only her title. First Keeper. She stepped out of the transport and onto the docking bay. The gravity was a little different from her world. The air smelled warm and human. She stopped walking. The human station commander waited nearby. She had been told not to rush the moment. The first keeper lowered herself slowly and pressed both palms flat against the floor. No one spoke. It was not submission. It was an ancient Velmir gesture. A way of greeting new ground. A way of asking the universe if the place beneath you was real. Then the old woman stood. And began to cry. Not quietly. Not with dignity. With relief. A human soldier placed a water container near her and stepped back without making eye contact. Later, in the official record, someone asked the first keeper what she had felt in that moment. She thought carefully. Then she answered. I was feeling the floor. I was checking if it was real. The sentence spread across human networks within hours. Not as propaganda. As a reminder. This was not only about winning. Winning was 11 minutes and 4 seconds. This part was harder. This part was years. This part was building something that did not turn into the monster it had destroyed. A year passed. The new gathering place had no grand name at first. It stood near Geneva, on a wide open plain that had once hosted human international meetings long before aliens arrived. The building was still only partly complete. Its design looked nothing like Nexus Station. No throne. No raised seats. No ceiling built to make the powerful seem larger. The main chamber was circular. The smallest species sat closest to the center. The largest sat farther out. When the plans leaked, powerful species were offended. Smaller species stared at the design for a long time and struggled to translate what they felt. The temporary name was the Congress of Shared Worlds. It had taken 4 months to choose because every dramatic name sounded too much like Empire. 7 species had formally joined. 11 more were in talks. Some were careful. Some were afraid. Some wanted guarantees. Some wanted apologies written into law before they agreed to anything. Humanity listened. That surprised many of them. The old council had listened only long enough to find weakness. Humans listened like they were taking responsibility for every word. But danger had not disappeared. The Salvon Collective had placed 400 ships near the edge of its territory. Its government had changed leaders twice in 1 year. Each new leader sounded angrier than the last. The Kathari were divided. Some wanted war. Some wanted neutrality. Some governors quietly contacted human diplomats while pretending they had not. Earth watched everything. Carefully. Always carefully. One morning, Lena sat in an office inside the unfinished Congress building. Below her window, construction crews worked on the central floor. A Velmir consultant pointed at a support beam while a human engineer took notes. The sight made Lena quiet. Not because it was sad. Because it was not sad. That was what made it powerful. She thought of the council chamber. She thought of Vethkel's threat. She thought of the 3 words she had sent to Earth. They said it. For 11 years, she had sat at that table and absorbed insult after insult. She had filed her anger away. Not because she was weak, but because anger could be useful if it was kept sharp and saved for the right day. She did not feel triumphant anymore. For a little while after the fall of Nexus Station, she had. Maybe 40 minutes in total. Then victory became work. Meetings. Drafts. Trade guarantees. Voting rules. Medical agreements. Border disputes. Translation issues. Trust. Trust was the hardest. A young aide knocked and entered. The COSAT delegation is asking about the voting weight protocol again, the aide said. Also, the first Cat-Hari observer from the breakaway region arrives tomorrow. Lena stood and picked up her jacket. Tell the COSAT we meet Thursday. I will have a revised draft. And make sure the Cat-Hari suite has the right humidity this time. Already handled. Good. What else? The aide hesitated. The Salvon fleet moved 12 light minutes closer to the border this morning. Lena paused. Which admiral? Vrexel. The younger one. Lena nodded slowly. Ambitious. Angry. But probably not stupid enough to start a war. Probably. Send it to the Defense Council. Continue monitoring. She walked toward the door, then stopped. On the wall was a photograph someone had placed there during the first weeks. It showed the first keeper kneeling on the docking bay floor, both palms pressed against the metal. Under the image, someone had written the same sentence in several languages. She was checking if it was real. Lena looked at it for a moment. Outside, the Velmir consultant laughed at something the human engineer said. The building was still unfinished. The galaxy was still unstable. The border fleets were still moving. The old powers were still angry. But the floor was real. And that mattered. Before we reach the final stretch, take a second to like the video, subscribe for more human-first sci-fi stories, and share this one with someone who understands that calm does not mean harmless. The Salvon did not attack that week. They moved ships. They sent threats. They released statements calling humanity dangerous, unstable, aggressive, and unfit to guide any new galactic order. Humanity responded with records. Not speeches. Records. Human media channels released the Council archives. Legal experts from 12 species reviewed them. Independent scholars confirmed the forged agreements, mistranslated clauses, hidden debts, forced conscriptions, and resource theft. The Salvon called the files fake. Then former council clerks began confirming them. One by one. Some were terrified. Some wanted protection. Some had carried guilt for years. A Drati clerk leaked internal orders proving that relief supplies meant for smaller worlds had been redirected to military projects. A Cat-Hari logistics officer exposed troop movement plans that showed the council had prepared for Earth's forced occupation before the public vote even happened. A Salvon legal assistant released the original COSAT Accord. The mistranslation was real. The galaxy changed again. Not with explosions this time. With documents. The old council had survived because most species could only feel the cage. Now they could see the bars. Lena understood the danger of that moment. Truth could free people. It could also make them reckless. Some oppressed worlds wanted revenge. Some wanted trials. Some wanted to seize every council station and punish every species that had benefited. Humanity refused to let the new Congress become a revenge machine. That made some allies angry. A Velmir elder once asked Lena in a private meeting, "Why should we be merciful to those who were never merciful to us?" Lena did not answer quickly. Then she said, "Because if we only copy their cruelty, then they still built the future. Even after losing." The elder hated that answer. Then, after a long silence, admitted it was probably true. The first official Congress session opened 2 years after the fall of Nexus Station. The building was complete. No giant statues. No throne. No raised platform. Only a circular chamber filled with different bodies, different voices, different breathing systems, different histories, and one very difficult goal. To build a galaxy where power did not get the final word simply because it had louder engines. Lena stood near the center, not above anyone. Representatives from 7 member species were present. Observers from 9 more waited in the outer ring. The Cat-Hari observer looked uncomfortable. His claws tapped against the floor. His people were not used to sitting away from the center. The Velmir delegation sat closest to it. The first keeper was there, wrapped in dark ceremonial cloth. When her people's old seal appeared on the chamber record, she closed her eyes. No one rushed her. The first matter of business was not trade. Not military borders. Not punishment. It was language. The Congress voted that no treaty would ever be valid unless translated, reviewed, and approved by independent language councils from every signing species. It sounded small. It was not small. For the Kassiti, it was justice. For the Velmir, it was protection. For humanity, it was memory. Because words had started everything. Vethkal had threatened Earth with words. Lena had answered with 3. And now the new galaxy would begin with words that could not be twisted so easily. The vote passed. All 7 members agreed. The chamber remained silent for a moment after the result appeared. Then the Kassiti delegation began making a sound their translators described as approval with emotional overflow. The Velmir placed both palms on the table. The human delegation simply breathed out. For the first time, the Congress of Shared Worlds had made law. Not perfect law. Not final law. But real law. Far away, near the Salvon border, Admiral Vrexel watched the broadcast from the command deck of his flagship. He hated humans. He hated their patience. Their timing. Their ability to look weak until they were not. But he was not foolish. He had studied Nexus Station. He had studied Prometheus. He knew now that humanity had not shown all its strength that day. That was the worst part. The fleet that broke the council had been enough. But enough did not mean everything. His officers waited for orders. Vrexel looked at the Congress chamber on the screen. Small species near the center. Large species outside. A human ambassador standing without a throne. He felt disgust. He also felt fear. And beneath both, something colder. Recognition. The old council had ruled through certainty. Everyone knew who commanded and who obeyed. This new structure was dangerous because it offered people a choice. Choice could spread faster than war. Vrexel turned from the screen. Hold position, he ordered. No attack came. Not that day. Not the next. And slowly, the galaxy began to adjust to a strange new reality. Humanity had destroyed the council in minutes. But what frightened the old powers most was not the destruction. It was what came after. Humans did not sit on the throne. They removed the throne. They did not force every species to kneel. They asked them to stand. They did not claim to be pure, peaceful saviors. They admitted they had built hidden fleets, lied on military records, and prepared for war in secret for decades. Then they opened their files. They allowed inspection of the Congress Defense Charter. They invited neutral observers to monitor reconstruction missions. They argued with allies in public. That confused the galaxy. The Council had always hidden disagreement. It called unity strength. Humanity showed disagreement and called it work. Some species found that ugly. Others found it honest. The Velmir began rebuilding their government. It was slow. Hard. Messy. Different regions disagreed on almost everything. Older leaders wanted restoration of ancient systems. Younger citizens wanted something new. Archivists fought over which laws should return and which should remain buried. Human advisors helped when asked. When not asked, they stayed out. That was difficult for humans. They liked fixing things. But Lena made the rule clear. Freedom that must be managed by someone else is only a longer leash. The Kassiti rebuilt their military under their own command. For the first time in generations, their soldiers swore loyalty to their own people, not to council deployment orders. The first oath ceremony was loud, chaotic, and impossible to translate cleanly. Human observers loved it. The Drati, once treated as scribes and background staff, became the foundation of the new archive system. Davil, the scribe who had hidden during the fall of Nexus Station, was invited to speak before the Congress. He almost refused. Then he stood in the chamber and read from his own log. His voice shook when he reached the part about the human soldier who spared him. "She looked at me for 1 second," he said. Then she moved on. In that second, I understood something. They had come prepared to destroy power, not life. The chamber stayed silent. Then a human officer in the observer section lowered her eyes. She had been on Nexus Station that day. Maybe she was the soldier. Maybe not. Davil never asked. Some things did not need to be solved to matter. Years later, historians would argue about the exact moment the old galactic age ended. Some would say it ended when Vethkal threatened Earth. Some would say it ended when Lena sent the message. Some would say it ended when the first human ship appeared on the Council sensors. Others would say it ended when the first keeper touched the floor and wept. Lena had her own answer. To her, the old age ended in the silence after the first Congress vote. Because destruction could break chains. But only building could prove you were not just another conqueror with better weapons. One evening, long after the first session ended, Lena walked alone through the circular chamber. The seats were empty. The lights were low. Outside, Geneva's night sky was clear. Somewhere above that sky, human defense ships watched the dark. Somewhere farther out, Salvon fleets still waited. Peace was not guaranteed. Maybe it never would be. But it was possible. That was new. Lena stopped at the center of the room. There was no throne there. Only open floor. She thought of Earth. Of Dr. Oren. Of the Siberian officer drinking cold coffee after activating Prometheus. Of the soldiers who moved through Nexus Station in 11 minutes and 4 seconds. Of the Velmir grandmother saying someone finally got tired. Of the first keeper checking if the floor was real. Of the council leaders who believed fear could last forever. They were wrong. Fear lasts only until someone proves it can be survived. Lena looked up at the empty seats. Humanity had not done this because it was noble by nature. Humans were complicated. They were flawed. They fought among themselves. They made mistakes. They could be cruel, stubborn, proud, and afraid. But when pushed hard enough, humans remembered something ancient. No predator owns the world forever. No empire is too old to fall. No table is sacred when it was built to keep others small. And no threat against Earth is ever just heard by one generation. It is heard by every ancestor who survived winter, war, hunger, disease, and darkness. It is heard by every child who will inherit the answer. That was why the Council had lost. Not because humans had bigger ships. Not because humans had better weapons. They lost because they mistook patience for weakness. They looked at a quiet species and thought silence meant surrender. They forgot that silence can also be preparation. And when they finally threatened Earth, humanity did not need to shout. It only needed 3 words. They said it. The galaxy heard the rest. And if this story gave you that quiet chill, the kind that makes you sit back and think, press like, subscribe for the next story, and share it with someone who should hear what happens when humanity stops waiting. What happens when the galaxy finally agrees to peace, but peace starts breaking from the inside? And what if the biggest threat was never the fallen council, but what survived it in the dark? Before we continue, take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who enjoys stories where victory is only the beginning of a much bigger problem. Because what comes next is not calm. It is pressure building under a surface that already cracked once. The Congress of Shared Worlds had been active for just over a year. On paper, it looked like progress. 7 species had signed in. 11 more were in talks. Trade routes were reopening. Old blockades were being dismantled. And for the first time in generations, smaller civilizations were speaking in rooms where they were not being ignored. But peace in space is never just peace. It is balance. And balance is fragile when too many species remember different versions of fear. Lena Vasquez stood in the upper level of the Congress building, watching a live tactical feed from the outer border. The Salvon Collective had not attacked. But they had not backed down either. Their fleet still sat in formation like a silent warning. 400 ships. Motionless. Waiting. Admiral Vrexel had not spoken publicly in days. That alone worried human intelligence more than any threat he had ever made. Because silence in a military mind usually meant calculation, not hesitation. Behind Lena, the room was filled with activity. Analysts. Translators. Defense planners. Diplomatic aides moving between terminals. A young officer stepped closer. Salvon fleet is adjusting formation again, he said. Not advancing. Not retreating. Just, reshaping. Lena kept her eyes on the display. Are they probing? She asked. Possibly. Or testing response patterns. She nodded slightly. That was the problem with peace built after war. Everyone still thought in battle logic. Even when no one had fired a shot. And somewhere far beyond the Salvon line, something else was moving. Not visible yet. Not officially detected. But old military instincts never slept inside species that had survived long enough to build fleets. Something was wrong in the background of the galaxy. Not loud. Not obvious. But structured. As if someone had started rebuilding something that had been destroyed, quietly. In layers. Piece by piece. Lena turned away from the screen. Keep monitoring Salvon movement, she said. And increase deep signal scans. I want to know what they are not saying. Yes, Ambassador. She walked toward the central corridor. The Congress building was still incomplete in parts. Some sections were polished and active. Others still smelled of construction metal and unfinished systems. It made the place feel alive. Not perfect. Alive. As she moved, she passed a wall display showing early Congress agreements. Voting protocols. Language protection laws. Emergency coordination frameworks. Small things that would have seemed boring in another era. But now they were the foundation of everything. And foundations only mattered when pressure started to rise again. Far away from Geneva, in a region of space no official map labeled clearly, a transmission was intercepted. It did not belong to any known species. It was not Salvon. Not Kathari. Not Velmir. Not human. It came in fragments. Broken signals. Encrypted layers stacked over older encrypted layers. A pattern designed to look like noise. But human systems noticed something strange. Noise usually decays randomly. This did not. It repeated. An engineer at a monitoring station leaned forward. Run that again, he said. The replay showed the same pattern. Structured repetition. Hidden rhythm. He frowned. This is not natural interference, he said. This is communication hidden inside interference. A second officer looked over. Who would do that? The engineer did not answer immediately. Because the real answer was uncomfortable. Someone who did not want to be found. Or someone who remembered being erased. Back at Congress, Lena received the report within minutes. She read it once. Then again. Her expression did not change. But something behind her eyes did. Mark it as priority 3, she said. The officer hesitated. Not priority 1. Lena looked at him. If it were immediate danger, it would be louder. She paused. And this is not loud. This is patient. That word stayed in the room after she left. Patient. Because patient threats were the ones that had time to grow teeth. Meanwhile, in Salvon command space, Admiral Vrexel stood alone on the observation deck of his flagship. His fleet officers had learned not to disturb him during long silences. He watched the distant stars. And he thought. Not about war. Not yet. About structure. About control. About what it meant that humans had not taken the council seat after destroying it. That detail bothered him more than the destruction itself. Every empire in history replaced what it broke. Humans had not. They had built something adjacent instead. That was not conquest logic. That was redesign logic. And redesign logic did not stop at one system. A junior officer approached cautiously. "Admiral," he said. "There is a message from internal intelligence." Vrexel did not turn. "Speak." "We found inconsistencies in Council historical data. Some of the integration records, they do not align with physical population data of absorbed species." That made Vrexel turn slightly. "Explain." The officer swallowed. "It looks like the Council did not just absorb species. It fragmented them. Some populations were relocated, others reassigned, and large portions, unaccounted for." Silence. Then Vrexel spoke. "Lost? Possibly hidden. By who?" The officer hesitated. "We do not know." But Vrexel already knew what he feared. If the Council had hidden populations instead of integrating them, then it had not been a governance system. It had been a containment system. And containment systems did not just dissolve when the center broke. They released pressure. Somewhere in the dark between sectors, something that had been held down for generations might now be moving again. Without rules. Without oversight. Without anyone left in control. Back at Congress, the first external delegation crisis began quietly. It started with the Cossati. Their internal factions had always been loud, but now they were louder than before. Because freedom creates arguments faster than oppression ever did. A Cossati delegate stormed into a private conference room where Lena was reviewing transport logistics. "We need stronger representation rights," he said immediately. Lena did not look up from her screen. "You already have proportional voting," she said. "That is not enough. Then propose an amendment." "We did. It was blocked by procedure." Lena finally looked at him. "That means other species disagreed." The Cossati leaned forward. "They are not equal to us in population size. Why should they have equal influence in key decisions?" There it was. The oldest argument in every system that had ever tried to replace empire. Fairness versus power. Lena leaned back. "Because if influence becomes only size again, then we rebuilt the same structure we destroyed." The Cossati opened his mouth. Then closed it. Because he knew she was right. And that made him more frustrated than disagreement would have. "Then the system is too slow," he said finally. Lena stood. "Or it is careful enough not to repeat history in the first year." He left without another word. But the tension remained. And tension in early systems was like heat in a sealed chamber. It always looked stable. Right before it broke. Later that night, Lena met with the Velmir First Keeper. The old woman had become a quiet moral anchor in early Congress discussions. Not because she held political power. But because she remembered what it felt like to have none. They sat in a small observation room overlooking the unfinished outer ring of the building. The First Keeper spoke softly. "You are holding many storms at once," she said. Lena did not deny it. "Yes." The First Keeper nodded slowly. "That is how all beginnings feel. People think freedom is air. It is not. It is weather." Lena looked at her. "Storms settle eventually." The First Keeper gave a faint, tired smile. "Sometimes they do. Sometimes they simply move to another sky." That sentence stayed with Lena longer than she expected. Because she understood what it implied. They had removed one structure of power. But power itself had not disappeared. It had only changed shape. And somewhere, in that change, something might already be forming again. 3 days later, the Congress detected its first unknown fleet signature. It appeared at the edge of mapped Salvon space. No identification. No response to hails. No known propulsion signature. Just movement. Slow. Deliberate. Structured. Salvon sensors picked it up first. Then human deep space arrays confirmed it. Then Kathari intelligence stations flagged it as anomalous. Lena was called into the central command room within minutes. The display showed a cluster of vessels. Not Salvon. Not Congress. Not any known design. Their shapes were wrong in a way that made analysts uneasy. Not because they were aggressive. But because they were unfamiliar in a deliberate way. As if someone had chosen not to be recognized. An officer spoke. "We are attempting language decoding through pattern emission." No response. Another added, "They are not broadcasting standard identification signals." Lena studied the display. How many ships? 17 confirmed. Possibly more behind sensor blind zones. She nodded slowly. Then asked the question everyone else was thinking. "Are they moving toward us?" The officer hesitated. "No. They are moving parallel to the Salvon border." That made no immediate sense. Not attack. Not retreat. Not exploration. Observation. Lena felt something tighten slightly in her chest. "Keep them tracked," she said. "Do not engage unless they cross border lines." Yes. But inside the room, no one relaxed. Because unknown observers were worse than enemies. Enemies had intent. Observers had unknown intent. And unknown intent was where history always became dangerous. In Salvon command space, Admiral Vrexel watched the same data. His instincts reacted immediately. "Send reconnaissance probes," he ordered. Within hours, 3 probes were launched. 2 never returned. The third sent back fragmented data. What it showed made Salvon analysts stop speaking for several seconds. The unknown fleet was not just moving. It was mapping. Not territory. Not resources. Patterns. They were studying movement behavior across Salvon defense lines. Learning reaction timing. Testing response latency. Measuring decision speed. Vrexel stared at the data. "They are analyzing us," he said quietly. A junior officer responded, like humans did with council systems before Nexus Station. That comparison hung in the air. No one liked it. Because it suggested something uncomfortable. That intelligence could be patient. And patience could repeat itself. Back at Congress, the Salvon officially requested joint monitoring cooperation. It was the first time they had used that word. Cooperation. Not warning. Not accusation. Lena approved limited shared data access. Not because she trusted Salvon intent. But because isolation during uncertainty was worse. And trust was something built in layers, not granted in one step. Days passed. Then weeks. The unknown fleet continued moving. Always just outside direct conflict range. Always just beyond clear identification. Never engaging. Never stopping. Until one day, it simply disappeared. No explosion. No retreat signal. No trace. Just gone. As if it had never been there. That silence caused more panic than its presence. Because disappearance meant one of two things. Either it had left. Or it had already achieved what it came to do. Lena stood in the observation room again that night. The first keeper was beside her. "You are thinking too loudly," the old woman said. Lena almost smiled. That obvious? The first keeper nodded. You are wondering if something else is building what you destroyed. Lena did not deny it. Yes. The first keeper looked out at the stars. Then you must ask a different question. Lena waited. The first keeper continued. Not what is coming. But what allowed it to come without you noticing? That question changed the shape of everything Lena had been considering. Because it was not about strength. It was about blind spots. Systems did not fail only when attacked. They failed when something moved inside them unnoticed for long enough. And the council had been full of blind spots. Too large. Too confident. Too certain that nothing could grow outside its view. Meanwhile, deep in uncharted space, something older was indeed moving. Not a fleet. Not an empire. But remnants. Pieces of civilizations that had never fully agreed to the Council's version of integration. Fragments that had survived in silence. And silence, when shared long enough, becomes structure. Not chaos. Structure. Back in Congress, new reports began to arrive from distant colonies. Small anomalies. Missing transport routes. Communication delays. Unexplained rerouting of trade vessels. At first, they were dismissed as logistics errors. Then patterns emerged. And patterns are never random for long. Lena called an emergency council session. The chamber filled quickly. Representatives from all 7 member species and observers from 5 others took their positions. The display showed a map of affected zones. Slow spread. Subtle changes. Not invasion. Redirection. A Caucity analyst spoke first. This is not Salvon activity. Another added, it is too coordinated for multiple independent groups. The Velmir representative leaned forward. It resembles Council-era logistics patterns, she said quietly. Silence followed that statement. Because it implied something no one wanted to fully say. The old system might not be gone. It might be reforming. Just without a central name. Lena spoke finally. We assume nothing until confirmed. But we prepare for all outcomes. A representative asked, including what? Lena looked at the map. Especially the possibility that the galaxy is still learning how to organize itself without the Council. That sentence reframed everything. Because the Council had not just ruled. It had structured habits. And habits do not disappear with leadership. They continue. Sometimes in quieter forms. Sometimes in more dangerous ones. Outside the chamber, Lena paused alone for a moment. The corridor lights were dim. The building was quiet. For the first time in a long while, she felt something close to exhaustion. Not physical. Structural. The weight of building systems while also watching for systems trying to rebuild themselves in the dark. A voice came from behind her. Ambassador. She turned. It was a human analyst. Long-range scan picked up a repeating signal, he said. We think it is the same pattern as before. Lena nodded once. Source. He hesitated. Unconfirmed. But it is coming from the direction of old Council space. That changed everything. Because Council space was supposed to be dismantled. But dismantled does not always mean empty. It can also mean abandoned infrastructure still running on old logic. Lena exhaled slowly. Bring it to deep analysis, she said. No assumptions. Just data. Yes, Ambassador. He left. Lena stayed in the corridor a moment longer. Then looked toward the glass wall where distant stars moved silently. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was adjusting again. Not to war. Not to peace. But to something in between. Something still forming. And she realized something that made her stop completely. They had removed a throne. But they had not removed the possibility of someone building a new one in a place no one was watching yet. And that meant the next challenge would not be force. It would be awareness. Because the most dangerous structures are never the ones you can see. They are the ones that feel like normal until it is too late to call them anything else. The galaxy had learned what humans could do in 11 minutes and 4 seconds. Now it would learn what they could do when they were not the only ones paying attention anymore. And somewhere in the silence between stars, something answered back. Not loudly. Not yet. But clearly enough for those who knew how to listen. The galaxy did not break this time. But it started to change in ways that could not be measured by fleets or borders. It began in the places where information moved faster than authority. And in any system that spans thousands of worlds, those places are everywhere. Lena Vasquez stood in the Congress Command Center, watching the latest deep scan results cycle across the main display. The repeating signal was back. Stronger now. Cleaner. More structured. Whatever had been hiding behind interference was no longer fully hiding. An analyst spoke quietly. The signal origin is stabilizing. It is locking into consistent transmission windows. Another added, that suggests deliberate control. Not passive leakage. Lena stared at the map of the outer sectors. Show me convergence points, she said. The display shifted. Multiple weak signals across the border regions were slowly aligning. Not toward Congress space. Not toward Salvon territory. Toward empty zones between them. The kind of space no one had ever fully governed. Because no one had ever needed to. Until now. A silence fell over the room. Then a COSAT observer spoke. That is not expansion, she said carefully. That is assembly. The word landed heavily. Assembly. Not invasion. Not migration. Not war. Assembly meant parts coming together with intent. Lena folded her arms. Or someone is building something in pieces, she said. The first keeper stood near the back of the room, observing quietly. Her voice was calm when she finally spoke. When the council ruled, she said, it did not only control space. It controlled the idea that anything else could be built. She looked at the map. Now that idea is gone. No one responded immediately. Because they all understood what she meant. The destruction of the council had not removed structure from the galaxy. It had removed permission. And when permission disappears, everything becomes possible again. Including things no one is ready to recognize. Across the Salvon border, Admiral Vrexel had reached the same conclusion independently. He stood in his tactical chamber, staring at reports from 3 separate observation fleets. All confirming the same anomaly. Signals converging. Movement patterns aligning. No hostile intent detected. No expansion routes calculated. Just formation. He finally spoke. Have we confirmed identity? His intelligence officer hesitated. No, Admiral. But we have classified it as non-Salvon, non-Congress origin. That is not an answer. The officer lowered his gaze. It is all we have. Vrexel turned away from the display. For the first time since Nexus Station fell, he felt something that was not anger or fear. It was uncertainty without reference. And for a commander, that was the most dangerous state of all. Because you cannot defend against what you cannot define. He made a decision. Increase long-range probes. And open silent channels to Congress intelligence. A pause. Then he added. And do not inform the central government yet. The officer stiffened slightly. Admiral, that would be necessary, Vrexel interrupted. The officer did not argue further. Because even Salvon hierarchy was beginning to bend under the pressure of unknown structure. Meanwhile, deep within abandoned council space, something old stirred. Not alive in the traditional sense. Not mechanical in the simple sense either. It was a system built from systems. A network that had once coordinated entire sectors of governance, logistics, resource control, and population movement. When the council collapsed, most assumed it had shut down. But it had not been designed to shut down. It had been designed to continue. Silently. Until reactivated. And now, across forgotten relay stations, dormant communication nodes, and abandoned administrative hubs, small sections of it were waking. Not as one body. But as fragments recognizing each other. Like memory returning after trauma. In one dead relay station orbiting a cold moon, a control panel flickered. Then stabilized. Then began transmitting again. Not outward. Inward. Searching. Matching. Assembling. Elsewhere, a transport hub that had not seen traffic in decades suddenly recalculated routing tables. Not for passengers. Not for cargo. For coordination. Something was trying to remember what it had been. And what it had been designed to become. Back at Congress, Lena received a classified alert marked Priority 0. Only a handful of people had clearance for that level. She read it once. Then immediately requested full system isolation for the command room. When the doors sealed, she turned to her team. Tell me exactly what changed. A senior analyst stepped forward. We intercepted a structured synchronization pulse across 17 sectors. It is not just signal convergence anymore. It is timing alignment. Lena's expression tightened slightly. Explain. The analyst hesitated. It means different regions are starting to act on shared intervals. Like they are being scheduled. Silence. The word hung in the air. Scheduled. That implied control. But control by what? Another officer spoke. We also detected partial activation signatures in abandoned council infrastructure. That changed the atmosphere in the room immediately. The first keeper closed her eyes slowly. So it survived, she said quietly. No one asked what she meant. Because they already knew. The council had not only governed living systems. It had embedded itself into infrastructure that could outlast governance. Lena turned sharply. How many active nodes? Unknown. But growing. And origin? The analyst shook his head. That is the problem. It is not centralized. It is distributed across old council territory. Lena exhaled slowly. So something is rebuilding the skeleton, she said, without telling us it still exists. No one disagreed. Outside the sealed room, the Congress building felt suddenly smaller. As if the walls had lost certainty. As if something larger than politics had just entered the frame. Hours later, a message arrived from Velmir Space. Not official. Not structured. It was sent through an old agricultural relay system that had no military classification. The content was simple. 3 words. It is returning. Lena read it twice. Then leaned back in her chair. The first keeper stood nearby. Her voice was soft. That is not fear, she said. That is recognition. Lena looked at her. Recognition of what? The old woman did not answer immediately. Then she spoke carefully. Of the thing that used to hold everything together. Even if it did so badly. That statement shifted the problem entirely. Because it suggested something uncomfortable. The council had been destroyed. But it had also been a stabilizing structure, however corrupt. And stability, even corrupt stability, leaves gaps when removed. Gaps other systems try to fill. Humanity had expected resistance from old powers. They had not fully expected reconstruction from abandoned ones. Later that night, Lena walked alone through the unfinished upper corridors of the Congress building. Construction crews had left hours earlier. Only the hum of systems remained. She stopped at a large window overlooking the outer docking fields. A Salvon observation vessel was still in orbit. Beyond it, distant specks of unknown activity flickered across sensor maps. She spoke quietly to herself. We removed a hierarchy, she said, and left behind an architecture. The first keeper's voice came from behind her. Most species make that mistake, she said. Lena turned. The old woman stood calmly. They believe breaking the ruler breaks the system, she continued. But systems are not rulers. She stepped closer to the window. They are habits made physical. Lena nodded slowly. So what are we looking at now? The first keeper looked out into space. Habits trying to continue without instruction. A pause. Then she added. That is when systems become dangerous again. Not when they are controlled. When they are uncertain. Lena understood immediately. Uncertainty inside distributed systems does not lead to collapse. It leads to self-organization. And self-organization without oversight does not always produce peace. Sometimes it produces something that looks like order from a distance. But behaves differently up close. Across multiple sectors, that behavior was already appearing. Trade routes that rerouted themselves without explanation. Communication relays that synchronized independently. Defense outposts that began responding to patterns instead of commands. Nothing openly hostile. Nothing officially declared. But increasingly coordinated. And coordination without a known coordinator is the oldest warning sign in galactic history. Days later, Congress received its first direct encounter. A Salvon probe fleet on routine observation duty detected a structure in deep space. It was not a ship. It was not a station. It was something in between. Large segments of modular construction drifting in formation, slowly locking into geometric stability. The probe transmitted visuals before losing signal. The structure was vast. But incomplete. And worst of all, it appeared to be expanding using old council design frameworks. Not human. Not Salvon. Not Congress. Council. Lena watched the footage in silence. Then spoke. Who authorized reconstruction protocols? No one answered. Because the answer was obvious. No one living had. Which meant something else had access to what once was. The first keeper watched the screen carefully. Then said something that made the room colder. The council is not coming back, she said. Lena looked at her. Then what is it? The first keeper hesitated. Something that remembers being it. Silence followed. Because memory is not harmless in systems that once controlled entire civilizations. Memory becomes instruction. And instruction becomes repetition. And repetition becomes structure. Lena finally spoke. Then we treat it as unknown governance attempting reformation without consent. A tactical officer looked up. That sounds like war classification. Lena shook her head. No, she said quietly. It sounds like prevention. And somewhere deep in the dark between old sectors, the structure continued to assemble. Piece by piece. Without announcing itself. Without asking permission. Without realizing that the galaxy it was returning to no longer believed it needed to be ruled. And that was where the next conflict would begin. Not between fleets. Not between empires. But between what had been and what refused to come back the same way. And in that space between memory and intention, something new was forming. Something that even humanity had not fully prepared for. Not because it was stronger. But because it did not yet know it was being watched.